We're here to talk a little bit about our yard waste and recycling contract and services, and just a little overview of the format that I plan on going through. I have a little bit of a review, and then I'm going to be joined by Steve Edwards from Waste Management for a little bit of waste management perspective. They're our contractor for yard waste and recycling services. We also have a couple of opportunities for questions, comments, and discussion, one in the middle, and then I'm going to make a few more comments. That first comment session for all involved, we'll put a little bit of a time constraint on it, depends how much time it takes to get there. I don't think it'll take too long. And then we have another one at the end to wrap up with, of course. So with that as just an intro, let me jump right into it. And we will also be joined by a couple members of our staff during the question and answer period. So for starters, I just want to explain a little bit about how this works in the city of Roswell and just remind everyone of most of the information that you've probably heard before, but just go over it quickly. We provide at the city residential garbage collection services, commercial garbage collection services, and we operate the recycling center with city forces. The transfer station management and operations is contracted out. That's currently being provided by Republic Services. And then what we're really talking about primarily today is our recycling and yard waste services contract, which is provided by Waste Management, formerly Advanced Disposal. Also, for background, there's a lot of history here. Thank you. I wanted to just run past a little bit of the history that has come before this council at various periods of time, beginning with the contract that was competed back in 2014 and awarded to Advanced Disposal Services. The next kind of major item was discussion of glass during 2016. And in December of 2016, Council approved additional fees to cover maintaining glass in curbside recycling services. That was the issue at that time. Under the current contract in 2018, we awarded a contract again to Advanced Disposal Services. There's a few details about that procurement there. It was initially intended to be a 7-year term. I think we're in about the third or fourth year of that. And included a 1-year notice for termination on both parties' part. We also, at that time, in 2018, increased the sanitation rates, and that was due to the increase in this contract, as well as to increase in costs for our own provision of residential and commercial garbage service. A number of cost increases had occurred, and those rates had not been increased for over 10 years. And finally, we amended the ordinance a bit, primarily because we took on the responsibility of providing carts for garbage collection at that time, and that required some ordinance revisions. So we have talked a lot about recycling in Roswell over the last couple of years, and we're going to continue for at least the next several months, if not year or so. And that's by virtue of changes in the recycling marketplace. This is directly out of a Columbia University study, and the couple of points that I want to mention, in the first bullet you notice the word contamination. It's become a huge issue in the recycling industry. You'll hear more about it today. The second bullet refers to 2018, China began banning imports of material precisely because of the contamination levels. They established very, very high quality standards for anything coming into the country. That created a dramatic change in the recycling business and industry in the United States, and we're dealing with the consequences of that now. And the last bullet is one that I wanted to mention, which is just the sheer volume of trash and waste production in the U.S. has changed significantly since the 1960s, with approximately, call it 100% increase in the sheer volume of trash that we produce. And you see it with our packaging of all kinds of produce and products today. At this point, Steve? Come on up. I'd like to introduce Steve Edwards. He's been our client customer contact with Advanced Disposal and now with Waste Management. And I'll be flipping his slides, but he will do a little bit of talking on their operations and some of their challenges.
Right. Thank you, Dan. Thanks for having me out here. I want to take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Steve Edwards, and I work for Waste Management, and my title is Public Sector Solutions Manager. And I've been with the company for almost a year, but before that I was with Advanced Disposal, and I've been with Advanced Disposal for about 20 years. I know inside and out all about local government. I know how it works. Also, to Dan's point about the merger between Advanced Disposal and Waste Management, from my perspective, it was a good one because Waste Management has a lot more tools than Advanced Disposal ever dreamed of. Waste Management has a lot more resources than we had, and what I like about Waste Management most is they're all about digitalization. They're all about being customer friendly. You're going to hear about some of the things that Waste Management is able to do with service verification. You're going to hear later on things that Waste Management is able to do from a customer perspective because they have an app specifically designed for the customers. Through this agenda, what I'd like to try to do is go over the perfect storm, why I'm here tonight. The district manager, Walt Ritter, is here. In case I can't field questions, I'll phone a friend. And we'll try to answer as many questions as we can. I want to talk about the recycling processing costs that Dan talked about. I want to talk about the pandemic impact on our service. I want to talk about the pandemic impact on our cost. And what I'm going to try to do this evening is stay out of the weeds and give you more of a 42,000 feet perspective. Dan talked about high contamination rates, and that's one of the reasons why the U.S. and other countries could not bring curbside recyclables into China. That resulted in catastrophic results to the curbside recycling market. And the end result was it resulted in lower to negative commodity values after processing costs. Right now, our processing costs to recycle or to process a ton of recyclables is $72 a ton, which is, we've never seen that before. It's unprecedented. We all heard about this in the very beginning since January of 2020. And my slide's wrong. It says 11/20/2020. So what I started to do, and what other companies started to do, is pass along these costs to cities. And what I did is I went to cities within my footprint to talk about an increase because of recycling processing costs. And they accepted that increase. I did not do that to Roswell. And this is kind of caught up with us right now. As a side note, what also happened about the same time we got hit with recycling processing costs, the host fee bill came about, and what that was, it's basically an unfunded state mandate whereby we had to pay host counties more money to landfill. And that impacted your yard waste, where we take your yard waste. Dan asked and Sharon asked a lot of good questions, and the first question is, what are recycling processing costs? And what they are, whatever it takes to process a ton of recyclables minus that blended commodity value at that time, that equals your processing costs. Not collection costs, but processing costs. At that point in time, too, a lot of cities around the United States were considering getting out of recycling altogether because of the high costs. None in Georgia did that, but a lot in Georgia considered it. And probably the biggest jurisdiction was the city of Augusta. Looking at my crystal ball, I think what you're going to see coming down the pike is the processors are going to demand a more narrowed scope of recyclables. And I think residents of Roswell are very lucky that you've got a recycling center here, and they're also very lucky you've got a transfer station here. So with that, the recycling market crashed. Now comes your 1, 2, 3 punch that hit us hard. The first punch is, of course, the pandemic impact. we had sick employees, plus volume at the curb went to in excess of 30% higher than normal because people were staying home. They created more yard waste. They created more recyclables. That was the first issue. The second one was a post-pandemic that nobody ever thought about, where extended unemployment benefits from the federal government were out there, plus you had the stimulus package. We had a labor shortage. Folks wanted to stay home, didn't want to work. With that, you also had a severe competitive situation with commercial driver's license trucks. Well, drivers that can drive a commercial truck. Our training through a big truck takes about 2 months. A lot of those drivers thought they could make more money, and some of them did. They moved to a different area or line of work, still driving a truck. So that was an issue. And the third piece of this is the Delta variant, which is we're still getting hit with that. We still have employees that are getting sick. So that not only hit our drivers, it not only hit our helpers in the back of the truck, it hit our mechanics, it hit our technicians, but it also rolled into our call center. Same thing happened to them. What did this do? What's the end result in Roswell and other cities throughout the country? You had service delays. You had call center delays, answering the phone. You had delays getting carts. And I was faced with a situation, and this happened everywhere in Georgia, because I've got competitors with contracts wanting help because they're in the same situation, and you have me in that situation saying, I can't help you. We're in the same boat. I think how Waste Management responded to this crisis went a long way. We held job fairs. We had hiring bonuses. We paid our people significantly more. We added a lot of creative benefits, such as in 2022, Waste Management is going to pay for your college education if you're an employee, along with certain dependents are going to be covered under that. I also talk about waste management resources. I talked about that in the very beginning. And I will say that one resource that Waste Management has is called the Green Team. And this is a group of drivers that traveled across the United States helping in situations like this. They came in, they understood the routes, they drove the routes, they picked up the yard waste and recyclables. So you have that resource with you. The bottom line, I think, today is it costs more to process a ton of recyclables. It costs more to collect the garbage. And yes, we were lowest and most responsive bid in 2018, but times have completely changed. Going on to the next slide, I talked to Dan and Sharon about what we're faced up against, and we're looking at a $2.42 per month cost adjustment, plus there's an option. What I provided are some similar comparisons of cities your size that have just went out to RFPs. The first one is City of Alpharetta just went out for RFPs, and City of Lawrenceville went out for RFPs. Their price significantly shot up for recycling services. One creative option that Dan and Sharon talked to me about was changing the service, but leaving the price alone. And one option is that we go to every other week recycling and take out glass, but we also need a couple contracted items that we're asking on that. But I think I'm getting into the weeds in that. I can't express to you enough how service concerns concern me as well as y'all. I know that. Our management team is doing our very best to keep it on the road that Roswell residents know about before COVID. I can't tell you exactly when it's going to get back to normal because we just don't know with the Delta variant. And I just wanted to tell y'all face to face, we are doing our very best. I know it's not where it was. And with that, I'll open it up for any questions or maybe turn it back over to Dan.
Now, this is our kind of first opportunity. We wanted to give everybody a chance to ask questions while we had Steve and Waste Management here at the table. There'll be some more information, but would you like me to recognize folks? Council member?
So, does this mean is this kind of a hard line point of where we're either going to get a year termination notice if we don't change the price, and we would be paying paying the rate we have for a year, and then we'd be terminated after a year and have to go back out to RFP? Or is this a situation in which we're in negotiations and we are able to alter the current contract to stay in that 7-year period with what we have? Because I just want to know what we're up against. This is a hard line here.
So let me give the first response to this, and Steve, feel free to jump in and clarify if I misspeak on your behalf. But this conversation began because we did receive a letter from Waste Management at the tail end of May that basically suggested they would not be able to continue the contract at the end of this fiscal year, so that's effective June 30th, at the same price. We have a 1-year notification clause in our current contract, and essentially they notified us of that 1-year intent to change or to terminate the contract unless we were interested in entertaining the $2.42 a month cost adjustment for the same service. And I believe that was it.
That's right.
Is that glass in or out? That's
The 242 is service as
excluding
now.
glass.
Right. And then the option was excluding glass every other week.
So that was, the second option was kind of a follow-up to what could you do for the same price, and it would be exclude glass and go to every other week recycling.
So $242 a month is excluding glass.
No, it includes.
No, that's the same service. Okay. And then the other choice is to go every other week and exclude glass to stay at the same cost
Correct.
we have. And would we stay at this under the 7-year contract term, or would we sign a new contract?
It would be amended, most likely, if mayor and council decided to go through with this change. I would assume that would be true.
So if you didn't hear that, it was, the contract could be amended to make that change. And in both cases, there's a couple of other requests that Waste Management has made that apply in either case. And one of those is a change in the inflation adjustment to a different indice that we currently use that runs a slightly higher rate, and some protection if the processing costs for recyclables get even worse than they are now.
Thank you. Just to dovetail on that conversation, if we were to remain on the same program to include glass, it would be $3 instead of $2.42, or an additional $3. I'm a little confused by the June 21st letter.
It would be the 242. If we decided to continue at its current level.
And the second recycling cart would be $3. I was confused.
The same as it is now. If you get an additional cart.
Okay, so that's just, there's no additional charge for the glass.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. I guess my concern here is with the instability of the world, us renegotiating this now, going into, fall and next year, are we going to be in the same boat come next spring or summer? And what certainty, I know you can never have total certainty, but what certainty you have that this price is going to hold up for at least the near-term future? Because obviously there's no sense in us doing this if we're going to be in the same boat this time next year.
How do you want me?
I would just say understood, and the one other comment that hasn't really been mentioned is if those two options that are on the table are not acceptable to the city, then our only other plan is to pursue a request for proposals and recompete, basically, before this contract expires.
Now, Dan, remind me though, is it that we're having a separate discussion on yard waste? Is that separate from this, or is that,
Yard waste does not change.
well, so I guess basically that's.
It is,
For both.
it is part of this contract, though, Councilman.
Right, so I guess the reason I'm asking.
The reason I'm asking is because technically it sounds like there's not just two options, or three, or not three, but four. Nonetheless, it's either the cost goes up and service stays the same, and what was on that slide was the recycle service goes down and cost stays the same. And then separately, we just let the contract expire and RFP. But then also separately too, and I'm not saying it's a good option, but just want to make sure we're exploring all options, is potentially looking at keeping recycling the same and potentially making adjustments to yard waste for cost savings. Is that something that's a possible option for consideration as well?
I think so, but yard waste in Roswell, 'cause I looked at different cities and what they're doing, especially Alpharetta. At your current price, your yard waste specifications far exceed other cities in the area. You can have up to 2 cubic yards out there. And I think if you monkey with that, I think you'd have a lot of residents asking questions. The recycling option to us was easier at every other week. We do that in a couple of different municipalities, and it seems to work with carts, as long as you have carts. But we did not adjust anything with yard waste at this point in time. And the $2.42 covers both recycle and yard waste.
Thank you, Mayor. So here you mentioned two reasons that you are increasing the price. One is recycling processing cost, and the other one is the pandemic impact to cost. So, two different, they might be, and two might be different on the future, because, maybe the aluminum goes up and more plants like Ball start recycling more aluminum and demanding more recycled aluminum. So I think it's two different. And the pandemic is not going to be for 100 years or 10 years, the pandemic. So, and then I want to add a third one that you didn't mention here. Well, you touched a little bit with the $4.6 billion acquisition in 2020 of advanced disposal, which my concern there is the lack of provider of this service. By consolidation, you start getting to monopoly, and when you get into monopoly, then you don't have options for better service at a better cost. So for a $4.6 billion acquisition of advanced disposal in October 2020, I would like to know what are the options other than waste management / advanced disposal today in Georgia.
So maybe I'll take a first stab at that, and we have a slide that deals with that a little bit in the follow-up material. So we've been kind of watching the marketplace, and maybe a little preview of that is that Alpharetta's recent competition yielded 5 submittals. So that was actually encouraging, and it's the most recent close-to-home information that we have about the local marketplace right now. And we'll touch on a little bit more of that in the next session, if that's acceptable. But yes, there's definitely been a consolidation in the marketplace.
Dan, would you also please go into a little bit about our recycling center and what we have the option to take to the center? Do we accept all the same things that we have with curbside? I realize curbside is a huge convenience for our residents, but just walk us through that.
Yeah, and if I could, maybe this would be a good time if we, if it's acceptable, to maybe go through a few more slides, because we do touch on this a little bit, and then there'll be additional time for questions.
Yeah, I think Councilmember Kaiser has
and-
a question before we dive into that.
Yeah, so you have proposed the $2.42 as a permanent change. Just call your attention to what our friends at UPS are doing right now, which is a temporary surcharge. And you might consider that as part of the options, right? So you don't have to go through an entire process while you've got what may or may not be a permanent situation.
Okay,
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you. And this is probably something we can talk about it at the end too, but I did just want to bring up that, this recycling is very important to the city of Roswell and to the residents. And so before any decision was made, I would definitely want to make sure that we went through a community, public input process, and was curious how other cities, have handled that, and being able to come forth and make a good decision.
I think that's a great question, and if I could segue, I'd like to cover a few other items, but the community input piece of that is a great point, because that was one of our first concerns in just trying to figure out how to deal with that. So this slide kind of summarizes the, let me just hide this floating thing here. So the current breakdown of pricing between services is illustrated in this pie chart. Yard waste being about a quarter, 16% for the curbside recycling program under the existing contract, and then about 60% for our residential pickup. And these are the impacts to the bill of basically maintaining the same level of service over here. We put it through with finance in terms, could we afford this and what would it take to do that? And then this is the no-cost kind of option that Waste Management proposed. And the alternative is reimagining a little bit how we do all of these services. To your point, is there something that we could do with yard waste that would be different as opposed to changing the recycling program? And I wanted to touch on customer input a bit here, and this actually ties in a bit with what Steve had said in terms of the effects and the timing of those. This is actually total customer complaints. In your package, it may have been mislabeled. I mislabeled that chart, but that we saw call volume-wise, and you can see from February to March, there was a substantial increase. And these are calls that are coming to the city's phone lines, basically, in total. And the blue line here, just some people have said, well, we're not getting the service we're requesting, and are you exercising the controls that you have in the contract? And this is actually the administrative charges that have been assessed to Waste Management that peaked in June and are now beginning to come down with some additional customer service staff. And this gives you an idea of just some of those complaints. That the big issue for us as the city, and I think probably for Waste Management as well, has just been phone handling and response due to some lack of key people who could handle those properly. So we've had a good bit of that spilling over to the city, and that's really why we've exercised those administrative charges. We're talking a little bit about where recycling is going in Georgia, and I think Steve gave a couple of examples. Here are a couple more related to what's going on in some of our neighboring cities. And in particular, one of the points that I had questioned Steve on quite a bit was processing costs. And this last slide here actually kind of confirms the $72 number that Steve gave us. I was trying to get him to explain where that number was coming from. But Athens-Clarke County, that does both recycling and landfilling, kind of indirectly corroborated that cost. This $30, we pay $38 a ton to dispose at the landfill. You add those two together, you get to 68. It's not too different than what Waste Management had quoted us. And this, I think, is just a bad news slide, but we're not alone in facing this, and these are just some of the headlines that have popped up all around Georgia related to this topic. And just a general piece of information. I mentioned the Alpharetta Competition because it is so current. They literally just made their award within the last week or two. And I wasn't sure if it was going to be available for discussion by this meeting, but they reached a rather quick decision. And this summarizes what they did. Now, they're a little different because they don't have a transfer station. They don't have a recycling center. Those are services that we do have in Roswell, and they give us a bit of leverage and benefits to our citizens. Theirs is a completely outsourced service, and now there will be, they've also changed to recently, when they got their letter, number one, they didn't have the one-year clause, so they had to make a change fairly quickly, and have now just received quotes and decided to make adjustments in their rates and a decision long-term. But they'll be paying about $30 a month for a service, but it will include a separate glass curbside pickup, which is something different. That's the only community I know of really in Georgia that's doing a separate stream glass pickup service. And it's not cheap. $4 a month, that's not expensive, but we currently pay somewhere around 40 cents a month per customer for the supplemental glass pickup that Waste Management has been providing. The problem with that arrangement is that it is a contaminant for all of the other waste that goes into the curbside recycling bin. So I just wanted to give you the benefit of this information, which talks a little bit about the other services and how they're handled. And back to some of the supplemental services. One of the things that we began doing immediately was thinking about what do our customers really want and trying to get some more information on that. We did initiate a yard waste and recycling oriented survey. Those survey results are just beginning to come in. We got our first round of them today. I was quite frankly very appreciative of everyone who took the time to submit their survey information. We had almost 2,000 responses in a week, which just shocked community relations and myself. And we are going to be digesting that and trying to process that as we think about what customers are really looking for going forward. But in thinking about anything other than the two options that have been put on the table, this is what's going through our mind. Changes to curbside recycling, and these are pretty much the options that Waste Management put on the table for us. And the big issue here, I believe, is glass. In or out, and is it separate or is it continuing to be mixed? And on yard waste, it wasn't something that Waste Management addressed, but it's definitely something that has gone through our mind in terms of, is there a different or better way to do this today than there was 10, 15 years ago? So those are the things that we've been thinking about. The number one thing that I would like to communicate to folks is encouraging the use of the recycling center. It's a tremendous asset to the city. Sometimes people don't want to drive there from a long ways away, but it's relatively convenient to a lot of folks. If we could encourage more folks to take glass to the recycling center, that to me would be the single biggest boon, because in curbside recycling now, it's a contaminant. At the recycling center, we actually do earn a little bit of revenue from that glass, and it's much more valuable when it's separated and clean instead of contaminating the curbside bin. So eliminating glass, I think that is going to be a problem in any curbside program unless it's separate, like Alpharetta is doing, and that's going to be a significantly higher price to do. And yard waste, interestingly, I think has a lot of opportunity for change, but change is never easy. And we understand that that's likely to make some folks unhappy, but I think the set-out limits have always been a bit of a problem because it's hard for people to judge what 2 cubic yards is. They can count bags, we can all do that, but 2 cubic yards, whoever's driving the truck and who's ever living in the house tend to have a different opinion about exactly what 2 cubic yards is. And with that, I hope that addressed some of the topics you were looking for, Mayor, and again, we have more opportunity for questions and answers, I hope.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to share, I did have some resident input about the yard waste, and the commentary was that a lot of people may not do it on a weekly basis, and right now you're allotted so much per weekly pickup, so that if you accumulate a lot and put it out in say in 3 weeks, you're going to be charged extra, and they thought that was not an equitable way to look at our program.
Understood, and we will be taking all comments on the appropriate level of service and the potential to adjust service levels and trying to factor that into our thinking. Our intent going forward, and I've asked Sharon and Nick, who couldn't be here tonight, to just be available for Q&A, just to hear all of the discussion as well as to potentially chime in. We would be intending, if there is any adjustment, to bring that back to this in council and committee for discussion prior to issuing any RFP.
Thank you, Mayor. 2 quick questions. I remember when we negotiated this in my first year at council when I was liaison to Public Works. I tend to remember, and I could be completely off, I'm just wondering, I think we were talking about taking glass out then. And we also then were saying that if glass did not get to a recycling center, it would then add tonnage to our garbage. And so is this switching glass from one to the other going to be cost equitable and the same because we're adding more tonnage to our garbage? Or is it, and then we're going to have to raise those rates, so it's really a wash? Or is it going to be cheaper to throw the glass away? Not that I'm saying that's what we want to do, but is it going to be cheaper to throw the glass away than recycle it?
I would take a first pass at that, and then I would ask Steve if he has an opinion. But my first opinion, and I would have to qualify it as it's an opinion, is the most effective thing to do is to bring glass to the recycling center. No question. Then it gets out of our disposal stream, and we earn a little bit of revenue from what comes to the center. For glass that is not picked up curbside and ends up in the garbage bin, net, I actually think it's probably less expensive for it to be in the garbage bin. And I'm making that judgment based solely on the current $68 or $72 a ton to process recycling and a $38 a ton charge for us to dispose of collected garbage. We might have to add another truck or a crew, but I think margin, the difference between those two, I think it's actually less expensive, not the right thing to do, but less expensive for glass to be in the garbage container than the curbside recycling container if it's not a separate stream.
I agree with Dan. There's a lot of municipalities that we provide service to, Peachtree Corner, City of Norcross, where they have a separate container. People can bring their glass there. When we got glass out of the curbside menu of recyclables in other municipalities, there was an education process, and most people understood. But there would have to be, to the council member's point, a good education process to make it work.
Okay, so with that being said, if we went down the road of removing glass from the recycling curbside pickup, do we have an opportunity or locations around the city via East Roswell? I mean, because it's really hard to get from East Roswell to Hembry, Upper Hembry, or from different places where we could have glass drop-off unmanned, where we have, a set, so we don't have costs there. We have unmanned glass drop-off, where that way it's a lot easier for just glass to be dropped off there. I know you have people that are going to drop off other things in glass, and it's going to become a kind of a trash site, which hopefully it won't. But I mean, if we are going to take it out, I think, for the residents of East Roswell and people that don't live close, I mean, Litchfield to Hembry is a long way as well. So, around the city where we could put different glass stations.
As you were speaking, Steve turned to me and said the same thing that I would have said, which is a lot of people do this at fire stations because they are manned. And you also use the term unmanned locations, which, again, just from everything that I've heard, unmanned drop-off centers are trash disposal facilities. And that's a red flag in terms of just operational viability, but hope that helps.
Okay, yeah, no, I think we would have to solve that problem if we were going to go down that road.
Thank you. What I think is an obvious clarifying question, and then one thing I'd like to ask you about the numbers you put up. I'm listening to, we might have to throw away the glass, and I can hear people, oh my gosh, we should be recycling that glass. When I have a contaminant in the stream, does that mean that things that I could normally recycle now can't be recycled and have to go to landfill?
Yes, sir. And there's a term that we've been hearing a lot lately in the last couple of years, and I had intended to mention it earlier, but we call it wish cycling. And the important thing about recycling is that there is an end use and end market. But we've been so promotional about doing the right thing and trying to be green, and I see this at home with my family. We want things to be recycled, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's a market for some of those products. And contamination does devalue the rest of what's in the bin. The biggest example, I think, may be cardboard, where glass is just a horrible contaminant for the value of clean cardboard and paper. I could be wrong about that. Steve knows more about it than I do.
And then my second question, can you go back, I'm not sure you can go back to the slide that had the $2.42 on it. If you can't, I can walk you through it.
$2.42, the green, first one?
Yes, sir.
It's one.
Too fast.
So I got a little confused. There's a slide later on that says that our current rate's $23.39.
This one?
That's the one. Standard service $23.39 plus $2.42 is $25.81. And so I was confused as how you got to the $29.
I think that $29 you saw on the slide was per year what Roswell would pay. Is that what you're talking about?
Well,
I think it is.
our bill for standard service is $23.39. You guys are proposing adding a $2.42 surcharge. And I don't,
The $29.04.
oh, I see. It's
here
20,
is
okay, so
12
it's,
times the
right,
242.
right. So we have to raise the price $29 a year. Thank you. That clarifies it.
Councilmember Wilson.
Yes, thank you. And I'm sure you all looked at dozens of different options, but one thing that I just wanted to ask about, and I think it may be what Alpharetta is doing, is it possible to provide a separate glass recycling container and then pick that up once a month for an additional fee? And then second to that, is it something that could be made on a homeowner by homeowner basis, or is it something that needs to be uniformly across, as a city policy?
I'd take a first cut at it and but
Okay.
Councilmember Wilsey was looking at you. The issue that I see there is, not issue, the way I understand your question is, we don't know what will be acceptable to the public. But I
Right.
think what you just said is a perfectly viable, would this be a reasonable service for glass for citizens of Roswell to consider? Separate monthly pickup is what I heard,
Right,
and potentially subscription-based, which
Right.
would be based on signing up for that service. And I don't know if that would be a popular service,
yeah.
but I think that it very well might be, because we're such a recycling-oriented community. There may be a significant number of folks who would sign up for it, and I think that's something we may want to explore. Steve, comments?
It's,
I think really what it boils down to is cost.
sure,
You have that once a month, and especially if you have that subscription, the cost is gonna go up even more.
right,
Now, for Alpharetta's program, it doesn't matter if you use it or not, you're still charged that $4. So that's just one aspect you need to think about. It's gonna be very expensive to do a subscription program for glass only. We're
And-
gonna be going to these different stops, and what we do now is we take the route around the whole city.
right. And so Alpharetta basically is having a separate glass recycling that's picked up every week. Correct, okay.
If you get charged that, you may not even
Right.
use that service.
So, let me ask you, how do you, at least that you've got guys on a truck collecting recycling, how do they determine which homes to pick it up from and which ones not to?
That would be problematic, extremely problematic, especially if a customer wants the service, but we don't get the work order in time. I have not seen any subscription glass-only recycling programs throughout Georgia.
And just to add one tailing comment on that, I think that's why we have, if we're thinking in that direction, I think that's what reimagining how we provide this service involves. There's things that we can do today from a communication with our crews, issuing work orders, that we couldn't do 2 years ago, let alone 10 years ago. I'm not sure that's possible, and it would take some working out and piloting, for sure.
Thank you, Mayor. Since we, as Roswell Recycling Center, want glass, I think we should try and focus or a way of driving that, because that's the big issue, it seems, that glass seems to drive the costs up for the general recycling, because it's a contaminant, and for us, it's something that we want and we can make money from. So if there's a way that we can figure out how to collect that, even at once a month or with our collections.
Keep in mind, though, that curbside recycling does not go to our recycling center. They're two separate entities. So if it's picked up and curb, it goes to a completely different place. If it is dropped off at the recycling center, it goes to the recycling center. So we would need to promote recycling at the center.
Yes.
Promote or reimagine if we could pick it up somehow too.
Wow.
Could be very expensive,
It
but
could
it's
be
an
very
option.
The
Just,
other question I've got for you, and I hate to move off of glass, but we've got another topic, which is yard waste. And, I'm telling you my age here basically, but I grew up in a time that yard waste was dealt with in your yard.
Burned it.
Yeah, you had a burn pile, you had a ash can in the backyard, you burned leaves, you burned twigs, et cetera. It never left your property. So if we are going to discontinue or drop our yard waste pickup, what are we going to tell the citizens of Roswell to do with their yard waste? Just a question.
I think you just hit on the reason that Steve didn't offer us an alternative on yard waste in the first place. But there are some alternatives that we have thought about just in terms of frequency. And I think what we may see with some of our customer survey, and this is very, very just preliminary information, is a wide range of folks' use of yard waste services. I think the participation figures for recycling are quite high, and the yard waste figures, I think, are going to vary, where some people use it a couple times a year in the spring and the fall, and other people would like it if we picked it up twice a week. And it varies a lot with yard size and how they have their yards cared for. It's also an area where I think there are possibly other things that could be done with yard waste rather than taking it to a landfill, but those haven't been tested locally in a big way. Making mulch, for example, or compost or something like that.
It feels a little like we're going backwards in recycling. Just my sense of it, because of the economics. Whether it's glass or yard waste, we're kind of pedaling backwards and saying, well, it's not economically viable. But then my second question is, how do we advise our residents and business owners how to deal with it? Because a lot of folks really want to do the right thing with recycling, so we need to give them options.
And we need to figure out what the best options are for Roswell today. And to your point, Mayor, when recycling first got started, there was largely a separate stream recycling effort with trucks that would pick up glass and paper, and that was, the economics were very challenging for doing that. And it was the mixed stream curbside recycling that was much, much cheaper to do. But now that quality standards are much, much higher, that separate stream collection or drop off at a recycling center is becoming probably much more the trend that we're seeing today.
Councilmember Judy.
Thank you. I don't know the answer to this. I don't think we should head down this road, but I needed to ask it. Are there cities that allow their residents to pick whether they want to recycle or not? And if they do, they contract not with the city, but they contract with a individual service to come to their homes within the city. There's preferred providers within the city that pick up recycling, and some people do it and some people don't.
I don't know of any.
You don't know of any? Yeah, because that would be really hard and really expensive, correct? Because of the truck routes and all that. Okay.
Councilmember Zapata.
Thank you, Mayor Henry. I want to, 2 or 3 years ago when we discussed the contract, the high contamination level was an issue. Still an issue, and I want to touch a point that our director just mentioned that, I don't know if you all remember, many years ago was divided. The track was divided on paper and then everything else. And then definitely this took care of the contamination issue. All of a sudden, decided to just have one track for everything, mix it up, and then also came back now with automatic, so eliminate workforce. So now it's automatic picking up the trash can and put into the truck. So, and we were very well used to separate paper in a blue bin and everything else in a bigger green bin. Might show how many years I've been living in Roswell. This might be antique, but was like that. So was providing cheaper service and better service. Today, fast forward, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 years, I don't know what was the time that stopped providing these trucks that they will separate so it doesn't get contaminated, especially the paper. We're talking about now contamination that didn't happen before, higher cost that was not before. So help me to understand a little bit what's going on here beside the consolidation of the industry. What else is going on here that the company is saving a lot of money by having this truck mixing everything now with automatic pickup and drop? And I believe, if I remember correctly, part of our contract contemplates some new trucks for the new for waste management. So we increased the price 2 or 3 years ago with the commitment to buy new trucks, and I don't know which percentage of the new trucks are saving the city of Roswell, but now we're talking about the cost of parts and maintenance of new trucks. So help me to understand better more the picture here before getting into the weeds of the 242 or 2904 and all this, because something is going on here, and I would like to understand better.
I can take that. Before Advanced Disposal, I was with BFI, and BFI had this contract, and they picked it up precisely the way, Mayor, you were talking about. They had different compartments, and then that truck went to the recycle center. It was already separated, but that was just a very cost-intensive truck to maintain, to keep on the road, and everything switched to rear-end load trucks, where everything's mixed. So to your point, you're exactly right. We kind of went backwards when we shouldn't have done that. We got away from it. Well, also, too, I think we did get new trucks in 2018 for this contract. Most of them were new. I think all of them were new. I don't know 100%. Walt, did we get 100% new trucks for Roswell? Walt, did we get 100% new trucks for Roswell? We got 100% new trucks. And it's just kind of the way the industry went. They went away from those separate compartments to compacted trucks, 30, 25-yard rear load trucks. It's just the way the whole industry went. But a lot of it was cost-driven. So that's the reason why. And for us to do that now, you're going to even put more costs on the street to the residents if you went back to those compartmented trucks. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'll answer the question, but then, what would be the cost to retrofit those trucks, to configure them, to have a papering ones on the front or the back or whatever, and then everything else? And then if the arm can, at the same time, pick up 2 bins and put it in 2 different parts, I mean, the technology, I'm sure, is there.
Those recycling trucks back in the day, when I first started with BFI, they used 18-gallon recycling bins. Those recycling trucks, compartmentalized recycling trucks, can't pick up they can't pick up carts like you have now. So the way the rear load truck works is the driver pulls up, the helper gets out, or actually it's all mechanical. So there's not a way we can go back to those compartmentalized trucks, because it would mean we'd have to give everybody 18-gallon bins to service it. Does that make sense?
The arm of the truck won't pick up and put in 2 different sections of the truck? The technology is not there, and it's impossible. We might send robot to Mars, but it's impossible to create this.
What you're asking for may be possible, but it'll probably take a new truck, is what I think we're seeing in the marketplace. I don't think there's a truck out there today that can do that yet.
Retrofit.
So,
Councilmember Flaherman.
Dan, so it's my understanding, just given the fact that the annual termination notice came in, when was it? When's the termination date?
Call it June 1.
Oh, June 1. So basically, we've got 9 months. So nine months, and it sounds like no matter which choice is made, there's going to be some negotiation, because it's not just a matter of council passes a resolution, it's a contract. And so time is certainly of the essence, and I think it is important that we're making progress. I agree with Councilmember Wilsey's point that this impacts residents, and certainly would like some input. At the same time, I think it's important too, though, that we're narrowing a focus for staff, Dan, based on what you kind of shared with me in our meeting. I'd say kind of, I agree with a lot of discussions being had. I'd love a way to have some type of incentive to be dropping off glass, contests, grants for nonprofit, whatever it might be, finding something. I'm just really concerned that if we are eliminating glass, then we're just, as was brought up earlier and discussed in the past, we're just gonna get a lot more glass in our trash cans. And just other issues of cost there and filling up, et cetera. So that's a concern I have. Same thing exists with switching for recycling to bi-weekly. I mean, as I drive around, I see so many of the recycle bins being the ones that full with everybody using Amazon nowadays and things like that. And again, which I think would result in just more trash that we're then having to pay for. So I see some economic concerns as well as some environmental concerns. I think there are potentially some good ideas with risks of, looking at having many different drop-off locations and things like that, but that's gonna take a big operational redesign and I think potentially takes longer than we have. And so knowing that, I think although there's the $2.42 cost savings compared to the increase, if we were to go that route, I think it doesn't end up netting to $2.42 because of the other additional costs, as well as lowered satisfaction from the residents, negative impact to the environment, and again, more costs for trash. What I'd prefer to do is, and kind of curious is, so with yard waste pickup, is it 52 weeks a year?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I mean, that's something where I think it is worth looking at. I think Councilmember Hall brought up a great point from a resident that she spoke to, that if we were to change that frequency, then we'd really have to look at it big picture and perhaps the weight or the amount has to increase, but the frequency decreasing and working out those costs. That's an angle that I see as a potential, but just kind of really curious if this council has any specific opinions or guidance, because I do want to make sure staff is able to work towards possible solutions.
Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm just throwing this out here as an idea. I don't know if it's a good idea or not. If the glass was in every other week and other recycling was every other week, I know that folks would have to get on the schedule, but that would be a way of keeping it separated. And if they didn't get it picked up, then it would just have to go to the next time. I mean, residents would have to step up and take some ownership, but if that would be an opportunity to keep the costs down.
It's absolutely something we can look at and consider as an option.
Councilmember Tyson.
Dan, when I bring glass to the recycling center, what do you do with it?
First thing we do, actually you would usually do, is drop it off into one of three bins: clear, green, or brown, I believe are the colors that we collect separately. Each of those has a different market value. So number one, it's never mixed and it's put into a bin, and then we sell it to someone who recycles it and turns it into new glass.
That market is still efficient?
Yes.
Thank you.
It varies significantly. It's a very energy-intensive process, and the glass market is an energy-intensive business. But yes, it works, and it's very closed loop and generates new product.
Councilmember Judy.
To Councilman Palermo's point, I think we would need to see the cost savings of going to a different model of yard pickup, whether that is seasonal when it's mostly, and when it's not seasonal, it's call in from, hey, I've got yard waste, to 2 week, every 2 weeks, or whatever the different options would be. And if that would offset keeping glass in and maybe a little bit of that $2.42 cost, I don't, obviously we don't know what that looks like right now. I think when we went through this 3 years ago, I remember the hard thing is the citizens of Roswell have expected to keep glass as a recycling in the recycling program. So how do we, if we're still there, and obviously you will tell us of the 2,000 responses, different things that come out of that, but if we're still there, then we need to figure out how to make it happen. I think it's important, and if not, we obviously have to go the opposite direction, but the costs differences based upon the different models would be interesting to see where we can get to, since this is the first time we're seeing this evening.
And I think, I appreciate that comment, and it reminds me that I don't think I had shown this general timeline slide, which is the one way that's the surest way to assess costs is to negotiate with a partner or issue an RFP to see what the market will price some of these various options at. And I just wanted to make this kind of comment in terms of where we're headed, and we have to digest, the information that customers have provided and the input that we receive from you all tonight and probably at future discussions, and try to get those costs quantified as best we can so that you can make, and we can all make, an informed recommendation and decision.
Councilmember Tyson.
A follow-up to something I asked earlier. If we're sending recyclable cardboard to landfill because it's contaminated by glass, that kind of defeats the whole purpose of something that is easily recyclable, and that is cardboard. And there's, as you've said, more of that with all of us getting things from Amazon and Chewy and all those people. It just seems to me like what you're asking us to do and what needs to be done is those waste streams need to be separated. That it's great to recycle glass, but it needs to stay away from things like cardboard and other container board, other things that are recyclable. Because if all that's happening is, we think we're recycling something and we're not because it's full of glass and can't go back to be shredded and turned into another cardboard box, then, we're fooling ourselves. So if that's where we're going anyway, then my preference would be, let's spend our time figuring out another waste stream for recyclable glass.
Thank you, Mayor. So I see a timeline issue RFP. So this means that our procurement department will go out to the market with the minimum requirements by the city to compete openly and transparently for a new contract?
Yes, and before it even gets to our procurement department, we have some shaping of the scope of those services and the options that would be entertained. So eventually, yes, it would go out through our normal procurement process if we're going that route. We still have the option of negotiating or accepting what Waste Management has put on the table, but in parallel with that, we are trying to sort out what we think the options would be should we decide to go back to the marketplace in an open competition.
Councilmember Judy.
When will we have to accept that? Or when will we have to accept, is there a date in the contract that we have to accept the new terms or go to RFP?
No, not that I'm aware of. They've served us notice that as of June 30 next year, there's a price increase or they're going to terminate. So my interpretation of that, and I'll ask Steve, although he may need to consult with corporate before he answers, is that we have the next several months, and it takes quite a while to make a transition in one of these situations. But we have time to go to the marketplace. That's why we wanted a year transition period. We may need to extend if there were a shift, but that needs to begin now so that we have the possibility of getting through the entire procurement process and then work out a transition period if there is a change in the contractors.
So, and your best case scenario, when do we have to have the decision made to not extend the contract, which will probably be at a higher rate, to transfer if that's our decision?
I think, and this is my judgment at this point, I think we would have to have that decision made by that early 2022 date that's on the screen. We either have another contractor that we're working to bring forward, or a selection for a different scope of service that's before you, so you have firm costs to compare against the 242 that Waste Management has put on the table to keep them interested in taking care of the city of Roswell. Is that, I'm not sure if that, you want to nod or say yes or no, but that seems like my interpretation of the timeline we're facing.
And I think too, really, I appreciate your open and honest dialogue tonight. We have been serving Roswell for the past 10 years, probably more. We have a local office in Roswell inside the city limits at off Mansell Road, and you know, it's the pandemic, I fear, is not gonna go away anytime soon. And putting an RFP during a pandemic is probably not a good idea. That's why I'm here before you to answer your questions and tell you we want to continue to be part of Roswell. We want to continue to provide service, but there are options. One thing we didn't want to do is back you into a corner and not give you enough time to consider RFPs. We want to do the right thing. So, dovetail off that.
Is there anyone in the public that would like to come forward and speak? Yes, sir, please come forward.
Hi, my name's Dustin Dorn. I live at 175 Jade Cove Drive.
Could you speak a little closer to the microphone, sir?
My name's Gus Hadorn. I live at 175 Jade Cove Drive. You know, I've always seen Roswell as a leader of the region. And I think there are some great opportunities here, but maybe not in terms of business as usual. You know, this problem belongs to all of us. It's not your problem. You know, there is a time when citizens have to take more responsibility, and maybe you as leaders have to help in that process of encouraging that and educating. The one word that hasn't been talked at all about here today, which I think is critical going forward, given the environmental crisis that we really deal with, and that is source. You know, we're creating these problems that we have, and maybe we don't have to create as much of a problem as we do have. You know, the one issue that comes immediately to mind is single-use plastic. That has to change. You can look at any place in the world and recognize the huge problem that presents. But the problem that I want to speak to really is yard waste, because I think that's 25% of your cost here. I'm having to pay a fee for yard waste, and I don't use that service. I compost everything in my yard. You know, nature solved this problem a long time ago, and we're picking up organic matter, and we're hauling it to ball ground. We're putting it in a landfill. That's crazy. That makes no sense. That's material that could be used by farmers. That's material that could be used by gardeners. We need to find a way to compost that in our city. When I lived in Asheville, that was done. They collected the yard waste, they recycled it, and it was given back. It may have been sold, I don't know. It has value. It's a product. It's not a product that belongs in the landfill. It fills the landfills. We're putting big trucks
on the highway in a place that has a traffic problem and hauling this material to a landfill. So I would just encourage you to consider, thinking beyond business as usual and thinking about solutions that really connect with the future. We can't keep doing what we've always done, and yard waste is something that can change. People could be encouraged to compost in their own backyard. The idea of yard clippings, the idea of leaves, I mean, that's good stuff. For anybody that gardens, they know that's good stuff. We don't need to be throwing that stuff in the landfill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward and speak? Yes, sir.
My name's Don Conity. I live at 8,000 Sandorn Drive. And I guess a couple of questions. I would certainly like to keep glass recycling going. I think it's important. And I think, I just learned something today about it, the recycle center where it's clear, green, and brown. I didn't know, I've not recycled glass there. So, I mean, maybe more education to the public would help encourage people to recycle glass. I guess the other question is on the recycling of yard waste. Isn't that more seasonal? I mean, it's in the winter, unless there's a storm coming through, which could be, and then it's a huge one-time or one-month problem. But it seems like there's a seasonal cycle to it. And then I guess my other question is, we're talking about residential recycling. What about commercial? And maybe not just recycling, but garbage, and is there going to be a fee increase for a commercial?
So let me just, if I could, respond to a couple of those. At this point, there is no commercial recycling program in the city, and these rates are strictly for our residential customers and residential base. And the other comment that I would make is, surprisingly, our normal yard waste tonnage is remarkably consistent month to month, shockingly so. We do have tremendous peaks after storms, but on a month-to-month basis, I was actually expecting to see exactly what you described when we did our last RFP, and the range is maybe 450 tons a month to 650 tons a month, but it's really much more consistent than that. Those are usually unusually high or low months. So I hope that.
It does, and I would like to also say that I think Waste Management's done a great job with the city and customer service, so we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward and speak? Yes, ma'am.
First, I wanted to ask a question. The transition location, how much is actually going to the landfill because of contamination, and how much is being recycled? I thought that, I've never heard the numbers on that. Also, why is glass a contaminant and not Coke cans and plastic bottles? I mean, I'm thinking liquid. Wouldn't all of those items be contamination items?
So I'm going to let Steve handle this answer in more specific terms
Oh.
to Roswell, but in general, I'm sorry.
That's their name for the record.
Oh,
Yeah, my name is Karen Valia. I live at 2155 Six Branches Drive.
Thank you.
Sorry
Sorry.
about that.
I believe the national statistic for contamination in mixed recycled streams is about 25%. And Steve, I believe ours may be a little less than that.
It is.
But it also, well, go ahead.
I think out of all the municipalities that I work with, Roswell's contamination levels are lower than the average. Dan had mentioned a lot of wish recycling. You'd be amazed at what people think are recyclable. We get bowling balls, we get hoses, and And to some council members' point this evening, it only takes some of that just to contaminate the whole load.
Right, but it's not only bottles, it's a lot of things.
It's a lot of things, yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
I have a loud voice. Okay, and sorry, I don't compost. I like the way Roswell handles the trash, the recycling, and I would opt to, keep it the way it is and pay an extra $242 a month, in my opinion. That's all.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
She doesn't get it right home. I'm Cindy Lightfine, 2215 Six Branches Drive. I feel, as this gentleman said, we're the problem. People that use staple use instead of bringing their own reusable container, is number one, look around the room. You have to educate the people. Yes, you have to educate the people to reuse.
I mean, everything they feel is disposable. And like you said, they throw everything in the recycle bin, from recycling their recycles in a plastic bag, even though it says no plastic bags, to putting in mulch bags in there. I mean, it's just total trash. Every single bin in our neighborhood is full of trash. It is not recyclable. So until you educate the people, and I don't know how you educate them, you put flyers, people don't read the flyers.
They go in the recycling bin.
There's no way to get the information. It's on the recycle bin. And I said to people, did you look at this? Oh, no. Okay. So you've got a very tough job. Good luck.
If I could make one comment, thank you for your comment, and one of the early findings just from scanning over our survey results is exactly what she said, which we need to do more education, both on what the recycling center could accept and what are best practices today. We tend to think that we deliver that message once and it's been received and understood, and if anything, the survey has reinforced that it's a constant message that we have to repeat and find creative ways to get across to folks. So it's taken to heart.
Additional comments from the public? I'll bring it back to council. Councilmember Wilsey.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question from what you're seeing in the industry, and a lot of great comments from the public, but just in the packaging industry per se, long-term, are we seeing a shift to more recyclable materials and kind of doing away with some one-time use just to make it easier? I mean, I know a lot of the things that I buy in the grocery store now, more of it is in recyclable containers and just practices of, I know some grocery stores, you can only use a recyclable bag. And glass kind of going away except for certain products. I mean, are we seeing that kind of being taken care of or being addressed in the business sector?
I think that's happening organically,
Right?
especially working with waste management and the way they view the world. So I do think corporate America is starting to move in that direction. It took them a long time
To get there? Right.
We do see more packaging that is recyclable, truly recyclable. So yes.
Okay.
Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. I just have a question. Is China still the largest buyer of this type of product for packaging?
No. They stopped in 2018, 19.
And who is the biggest consumer now?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
I think Brazil was in there for a while, Peru. Don't know the answer to that.
Thank you.
Additional comments from council? So Dan, can you give us next steps?
That timeline?
And if you need guidance.
I think for right now, we are gathering as much information as we can. This has been an extremely informative couple of weeks for us and couple of months, going back to when Steve first visited. And that will continue, and we will return to you all at committee to give you an update with more information from the survey, and I expect that we will issue a follow-on survey. So once again, thanks to everyone who participated in that. More to come, and we will try to bring you some more informed options of moving forward along that timeline.
Thank you, Dan. I participated. I hope you all did. And by the way, I knew about the clear brown and green glass at the recycling center because I actually take glass up there. But, so no, I think that we've got a lot of important things that we've listened to tonight. And education of our citizens is one of them. And I think that that's very important and, you know, just providing the guidance. Because I can tell you, my husband and I have gotten into it before with something he's put in the recycling bin, and he'll say, well, the neighbors put it in there. That doesn't mean it's right. But, you know, people just see the other recycling bins out at the street and, oh, well, they're putting pizza boxes in there and da-da-da-da-da, so, you know, we can do it. And those, you know, we find out what the contaminants are. So thank you. We are adjourned.
Where's your recycling container, Mayor? Over there?